Welcome to the Raising Confident Girls podcast, your guide to raising strong, confident daughters. I'm Melissa Jones, the founder of Girls Positivity Club and a teacher for over 20 years. In a world where girls often feel overwhelmed, anxious, and confused, this podcast is your go-to space. As caregivers, we navigate challenges together. I founded Girls Positivity Club to provide a place where you belong and get the tools to face today's hurdles. Consider this your regular check-in with a trusted friend, offering insights and practical tips for meaningful conversations. I'm here to help you feel confident on this journey of raising a generation of empowered girls. Let's dive in and raise those confident girls together. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here today because spring is in the air. It feels so nice. If you're listening to this in real time, it is April and it's so very nice outside, moving into May. And it's when we start to see all these changes in nature and all these beautiful things that are blooming. And it really got me thinking about girls and the way that you may see changes in your daughter in this time of year. So what I mean by that is when I was a teacher, because I was a teacher for over 23 years, and what I would notice in spring was a big change in my students, especially my girls. So it's always really fun to look back at like their first day picture versus their last day picture and things like that, just to see how physically they've changed, but also emotionally, and especially at the age that I taught. So 10 years, I taught that fourth grade age, which is like 9 and 10 years old. And then fifth grade, I taught 10 years, which is that 10 to 11 year age, and going into those really, they really are in their tween years at that time. And we often will see a lot of changes in our girls because that's just the time of, development. We always do, but especially in maturity, and especially in them wanting to be more independent. So this is often a challenge for parents because it's like you still see them as little, which they are, but they're starting to transition into that period of time where their adolescence is like between 12 to 18, where they're starting to want more independence. They're wanting to start to do things on their own more or have more privileges. And that brings us to the topic of today's episode, which I hear a lot from parents of this age group. So that 9 through 12 age. And it doesn't mean if your daughter is younger or older that you won't get value out of this episode. I always think it's great, and you can hear my dog walking around, that we talk about things that are relevant to your daughter, at different stages, but also you can use this to help your nieces or to help, other girls in your life too, that are, or maybe even moms or dads that are going through having kids at this age, especially girls. So what parents have told me is that their daughters won't talk to them anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that they give them the silent treatment. And I'm not talking about that they'll never talk to them, but it changes. Their conversations change and they don't really know why. So I heard this from a mom a few months ago, and she was telling me about how she and her daughter used to be really close. They used to do things together all the time. They used to enjoy spending time together. And then all of a sudden, when she was like 12, 13, it just dropped off, and she wanted to be in her room more. She wanted to be talking to friends more than she was talking to anyone else. And it really bothered her because she didn't know what had gone wrong. There wasn't like something that she could pinpoint. And the good news is it is a normal stage in life. Now, it doesn't mean that every girl is going to shut their parents out or anything like that. Because I always hate when people say, oh my gosh, the teen years are horrible. You have, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. I think that comes from a place of maybe their past and things, but I don't think it always has to be like that. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. And, there are good stages to every age, and there are challenges to every age. I mean, I'm sure you can think back about when your daughter was young, or, the girls that were young, and and the tantrums and things like that happen when they're young, but there's also beauty in that. Their imagination is amazing when they're little, and as they get older, this independence is actually not something to fear, but it's something to embrace and to help her through. And there are ways to still reconnect and talk to your daughter, even if you are going through this stage, or maybe your friend is, or maybe your sister or brother, with their daughters and things. So, this mom was telling me, like, we used to hang out, we used to bake together, we used to go on walks together, and now she just doesn't want to do any of that, and she hardly talks to me. And I feel like anytime we do, it gets to this point where it becomes this big argument. And she's like, all I'm trying to do is connect, and it turns into this where she feels like that I'm butting into her life. I'm trying to be too overbearing and things like that. And I really am just trying to connect. And then I get frustrated and I get mad and I lose my temper and she loses her temper. And then before I know it, we're in this fight. And we've all been there. Like, I never will claim to be a perfect parent because I've been there. I've yelled. I've said things I shouldn't. I've, just done the wrong things. And we learn from that. Just like we teach our girls, it's like, you learn from it. You learn from it. You go back and apologize. You have a conversation about it. And there are lots of different ways, to do that, to make amends, or to, maybe you're like, I don't want to apologize, but I want to try something different next time and see if that works better. I've always found that really powerful, to go back and be like, hey, I know I didn't handle that correctly. This came out the wrong way. That's not my intention. I love you. I support you. Here's what I meant. And most of the time they'll say back, I shouldn't have said or done what I did either. I didn't mean that either. I love you too. And then it becomes this like beautiful bonding moment. So, you may be feeling kind of, if you're in this season where your daughter's starting to change her personality, she's still herself, but she just is starting to pull back a little bit and wanting more independence and more alone time. You may be feeling a little bit sad about that, because it is a little bit of like a grieving, because especially when they were very close to you and they were, just, I don't know, you just spent a lot of quality time together, and you told each other things and it seemed easy. It doesn't mean that that's the end, that everything's downhill from here, and that there's, no hope and things like that. That definitely is not this kind of a podcast. It's like, no, it's just going to look a little different, and you still can be close with your daughter. And it's just going to take some time to build that new relationship with her in this stage of her life. So there's always a way. There's always a way to connect. You're not losing her. You can get her back. If you feel like you are lost, there's always things to do. It's never too late. So I just want to send you that encouragement. If you are a person who feels like, I don't know where I went wrong, or I don't know what even happened, or, oh my gosh, I don't want that to happen, it doesn't have to happen exactly, in a certain way. But if it ever does, and you feel like that little tug where it's like, ooh, something's starting to change, I need to, check back in. I want you to understand why this may be happening and know what to do. And one of the reasons that it often happens with girls is because of peer influence. Now, that doesn't mean that she has horrible people in her life, like terrible friends. There are those occasions where she does choose, maybe they're not good friendship, or maybe a gossipy friend group, or something where they just don't treat her well, or something like that. But what I'm talking about is sometimes when girls are ahead in development, so I'm talking about emotional development, they may be starting to pull their independence, or not pull it back, but like start to really look for that independence, and then talk to your daughter about it and be like, oh, well, I'm allowed to do this. Or, oh, well, I don't talk to my parents about that. Like, maybe she mentions like, oh yeah, I told my mom about, how hard that thing was that happened at recess the other day. It really, how we were both upset about it. And her friend might say like, I can't believe you told your mom that. I would never tell my mom that. And it's not that that girl is a bad friend or something like that, but it may start to have your daughter question, like, well, should I be telling her those things? And it's about us reinforcing that, yes, you should. And yes, I'm a safe person to talk to about things. And also, if your friends don't, that's them. Like that's their dynamic in their family. Um, and it's always not accurate. Like there, sometimes girls say things like that, and maybe they do have deep conversations, but especially if it's not the norm for a girl to talk to her family about things and she starts to kind of pull back and she's talking to your daughter about it, it may influence your daughter a little bit. So it's just noticing that and asking, if you notice that a friend is having an influence like that, and I don't want to say necessarily a negative influence, but it could be. I mean, it could be in that area. This is a silly example, but I remember I went to a friend's house when I was that age, and she told me I was using this like face cream. It was like a heavy like face cream, and to like clean my face, and I had really good skin. And she was like, "Why do you use that? That's going to clog your pores and make you have a lot of acne." And so I stopped using it. And then when I stopped using it, it was working for me. I did kind of break out a little bit. My mom was like, "Why did you stop using this?" And I was like, "Well, Vanessa told me that it's bad for my skin." She's like, "Honey, you don't have to, believe everything your friends say." And so it's not that they throw everything out the window you ever say, but at this age, they start to trust their friends in different ways. So it's about noticing that, like my mom did. And I know it's not the same example, but it's an example of an influence that a friend can have on you. And she wasn't a bad girl. Her mom had told her that, and that's what she believed. So it's like that with, talking to your daughter and people having different friend daughter, relationships with their friends. And so that's one way. Another way is conflict or misunderstanding. There are those times, as we all know, conflict is very normal in families. I mean, we have conflict, everybody does. And it's about, sometimes there can be a misunderstanding, especially I hear from girls about academic pressure or doing following a certain path that their parents want them to follow. And it's like, that doesn't always align with what they want, and it can cause some conflict. So if you think about, like, yes, you want your daughter to do well. Sometimes we can put a little bit too much pressure on grades and be like, well, what happened? I remember my dad saying one time, I'd studied really hard for a test, and I'd taken the test and I'd gotten a B on it. And I was actually really proud of that B because it was a really hard test. And I was like, "Hey, Dad, I got a B on my geology test." And he was like, "Why didn't you get an A?" And I don't think that he meant it in a degrading way, but he wanted me to do well so that I got a good education, all those things. So I think those little comments, to me, it was like it wasn't good enough. And that caused me to kind of put my guard up about telling him when I got less than an A, because I felt like that was a failure in some way. And that's not at all what he meant. He was teasing me a little bit and telling me that he thought I could do it. But it put this little bit of doubt in my mind where I was like, maybe I shouldn't tell him unless I only get an A. And so it's those little things that can sometimes start to cause a little bit of misunderstanding or conflict. And really, all that needs to be resolved in that case is a conversation. And sometimes those communication styles can also be a little different. So, especially if you and your partner have two different communication styles, I know that my husband is more authoritative and he is a police officer, so that's very natural to him. Whereas I'm more of an open communicator, soft. And it's not that mine's better than his, it's just very different. And so, my teenager tends to open up to me more because we just have a different communication style. So that's another thing, is like reflecting on your communication style. And it doesn't matter, which parent, or if you're a single parent, like, you want them to go to someone who's a warm adult, who's a caring adult in their life, and maybe it's a grandparent. I know that my teenager has talked to grandparents before, especially my mom, about things. And and that's okay. Like, it's just knowing that they have someone to go to who's a trusted adult, as well as talking to their friends too. I mean, they're going to talk to their friends about things as well. So, peer influence, conflict or misunderstanding, communication style, academic pressure, these are all reasons that there can be a disconnect. Another one is that independence and that curfew, especially as they get into that teenage, they want to stay up later, they want to go places on their own. And I remember a mom telling me that in their neighborhood, their daughter, who was 13 at the time, she was wanting to walk down to a faraway place in their, like a coffee shop that was close to their house, but it was a few blocks away, and she had never done that on her own before. And it was not a busy road, but it was one of the main roads in town, like just a downtown part, and she had never let her do that before. And so the daughter was talking to me. We had a coaching session, and she was talking to me about, like, she was frustrated by that lack of trust in her mind. It was all about trust, like that her parents didn't trust her to make it there and do the right thing. That wasn't it at all. It was they were afraid because people being around, crossing traffic on her own. Will she be safe? Will she be taken care of? Will she come back home? So it's just a conversation about that and explaining. And not that you have to explain every single thing, but I do think there are times when we assume that they know and there's a miscommunication about it, which can cause tension in relationships. So just thinking about that. And even with chores and things, like having, people have different opinions about chores. Sometimes the girls may think that they have uneven chores. So if they're the oldest, they may feel like there's an unfair, like they have to do more than their younger sibling. And that's unfair for some reason in their mind, because they shouldn't have to do more. And that can cause some tension. So there are a variety of things that can happen. That cause this. And it really is just being reflective and thinking through, like, okay, could it be this or this? And then it's trying to find that space to have that conversation that's going to lead you more to understanding why she's feeling this way. And it really could be that she feels a little bit smothered because she feels like she's being treated younger than what she is, and she wants some independence. And it's about coming together and coming up with ideas for how you can gradually give her some independence without just letting loose and having no boundaries at all. Because they want boundaries, even though they don't say they do. We have to have some boundaries in place, because otherwise they don't know what's acceptable and what's not. And so they're going to test those too, of course, because that's normal. But there's power in that, in knowing that you can have conversations around it. And not that you can explain everything to them, but I know I don't as a parent. Like, there are some things I'm like, this is for your safety, this is why you don't have to agree with me, and it's also okay if you're mad at me about this, but until this happens, we're going to keep it at this. And there are times where it just has to be like that, and then other times where it's like, tell me why you think that you should go down to the coffee shop, and sometimes they have a valid point. It's like, okay, yeah, I get that. And I think I could bend on this a little. So it's really about being flexible as a parent, but also having boundaries. I hope that's not confusing, but you know what I mean. So, you know, especially if your daughter has those deep emotional feelings at this stage in her life, like you might be noticing some really deep feelings about things. And that can cause a little bit of confusion, like, what's going on? Is something wrong? And it doesn't always mean something's wrong. It could be just heightened emotions, feeling like an uncertainty about something, especially as they get into switching schools or going to a new grade or going to a new school. I mean, that's a huge change. It could be that there's a lifestyle change, like a move. It could be that um, she's thinking about losing touch with her friends over the summer. So it really is a lot of a variety of things. It could also be social media use, meaning phone use. Like, she wants to use a phone and you're not quite ready for her to do that yet. You want to hold out as long as you can so that there are not those negative effects of social media. And that's a whole other podcast that I'll do another time. But it's about figuring out what it could possibly be and having a conversation with her about it and asking that. I'll go back to that every time. Like, are you open to a conversation about whatever it is? Like, I just want to check in with you. I feel like we are a little bit disconnected, and I really want to be close to you and for you to feel supported. So, what can you do? So, I've kind of put some little examples in with all of those, but I like acronyms if you've listened to the podcast before, because I think it's very easy to remember. So, I think of Aretha Franklin, respect. Your daughter, the main thing is your daughter wants respect from you. She wants to feel that, and you want respect from her. So it's like a mutual respect. And I thought I'd use that acronym to give you some solutions and some things to try, and you can let me know what works and what else you would add to the list. So the R is respect boundaries. So if you notice that your daughter does want that alone time, it's giving her that space and having a time where there's family time and there's alone time. So there's that you could have a boundary about, okay, that's fine. We don't want you in your room by yourself all the time. You may want to do that, but these times we're going to all be together as a family. Maybe it's dinner. Maybe it's going for a walk together. Maybe it's just a certain amount of time where you're watching a show together, anything. So respecting her boundaries and also her respecting yours. I think that's really important. And those can be very powerful. It's like, I mean, that's the way that things have to be. It can't be that they have no say in anything, because that's going to cause resistance. And then it's not that you have no say in anything either, because that's going to cause chaos and possibly for things to spiral, because it'll be very confusing. There won't be any clear way for her to know what's right and wrong. The E is empathy and understanding. So it's all about considering her perspective and sharing your perspective with her. So going back to the coffee shop example, the daughter had no idea that her mom, I mean, yes, she kind of knew the safety thing, but her mom was really having a hard time with letting go of her getting old enough to be able to do those things, even though she did trust her daughter. So they had a great conversation about it. And I actually had the girl bring it up to her mom and saying something like, Mom, I've really been wanting to do this, and I'd like to talk to you about it because I know that you don't really want me to, but I want to tell you why it's important to me. So it's giving them that language of like, here's what you can say to me if something's really important to you. And I want us to be able to talk about these things in a calm way so that we can come up with a solution together. And again, this wouldn't be for every single little bitty thing. These are like for the important things. The S is for seeking common ground. So again, it's coming together, deciding, okay, we need to come together on this. If we're not going to agree one way or another, how can we compromise? Or I want to give you that independence. Let's gradually move into that. It's too fast for me to have you go straight there. So maybe I walk you halfway and then I watch you walk the rest. And then maybe I walk you a little bit further and then, or whatever the case would be. This could be for a lot of situations, but I'm just using the coffee shop example as an easy one that's a little bit more tangible. The P is practice patience. So knowing that this is not going to be an automatic thing. Like there may be times where I've said this before, you try to have a conversation and it's not the right setting, not the right timing, or just it doesn't go well. And that's okay. Just be patient. Know that at least bringing things up is going to get you closer to it than never talking at all. And being persistent, like knowing that you're going to have to come back to this more than once, especially that 12 to 18 age. You're going to constantly be coming back to communication and checking in and setting boundaries, giving some freedoms, deciding what you feel comfortable with and things like that. It's all, I don't want to say balance and act because I don't really believe in true balance. I think that's such a hard thing, but it is something that you're going to kind of go back and forth about because you're going to be figuring things out as you go. And sometimes you're going to give this freedom. And you're going to be like, ooh, that was too fast. That was too much. We're going to pull back a little. And other times you're going to be like, you know what? She did great. I'm going to give her a little bit more. And I think that's super empowering and powerful. So that's practicing patience. The C in respect is communicating openly. So it's asking what she prefers in communication style. So there are going to be times where maybe she does want to pass a journal back and forth. Maybe she does want to have a conversation at bedtime. It's thinking about when is she the most open and asking her, when would be good times to talk about certain things? Do you want to have a set time, or are there times that are like off limits for you? And then you can do the same. It's not all about, her only saying that. It's like, when I'm making dinner, that's a perfect time to come and talk to me, or when I'm driving, or those are not good times. So again, communicating about when is a good time to talk about these things and deciding that together is really important. And then the T is take initiative to connect and initiate conversations. Like, how can I support you in this? And it's just being honest and saying like, hey, I feel like we've really been kind of out of touch, and I know it's going to take time for us to build this, but I'm really wanting to spend more time with you. What would feel good for you right now? Like, I know you want your independence and I want to respect that. Also, I miss you and I want to spend time with you. And they really respond to that, And I think sometimes we think we're going to get the eye roll, especially in that teenage, but it actually might surprise you. And especially because they want that from us too. And sometimes it's texting that. Like sometimes when they get their phones when they're older, it's like I've had heart to hearts with my teenager on text. And I think that's so surprising. People are like, oh my gosh, why would you just not talk in person? And it's like, well, they don't always want that. And that's okay. And yes, I do talk in person, but it's about trying different things or like leaving a little note or whatever, and knowing that all of those efforts pay off. And I know that you want to be close with your girls in your life, and I'm here to help you. So if there's ever anything that you think of that's like, ooh, this works really well for, me with the girls in my life, please let me know. And if this was helpful, the best compliment you can give is to send this to another parent or caregiver of a girl who this could help. And as always, if you have ideas for shows that you'd like me to cover, please just send me a message on any social media, Girls Positivity Club or girlspositivityclub@gmail.com. 5-star ratings are greatly appreciated and get more people to see the podcast. So until next time, keep raising those confident girls. You have got this. Thanks for joining another empowering episode of the Raising Confident Girls podcast. Share today's insights with caregivers and friends, building beautiful relationships with strong girls. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're not just a podcast, we're a community. Follow Girls Positivity Club on social media for more empowering content on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. This podcast empowers you, supporting incredible girls. Let's create strong, beautiful relationships with the girls in our lives. I appreciate you listening today. Stay confident, stay connected. Until next time, keep raising those confident girls. You've got this.